In this nugget, we take a look at very useful user and device collections. Alright, so what have we done so far if you've been following us for the previous nuggets? One of the things we did was we went into administration, and under hierarchy configuration we have discovery methods, right? Until we start to discover stuff, we have nothing to work with. And until we have something to work with, we have nothing in assets and compliance. But you can see here that we now have various users that appear, various devices that appear, and we can start to work with things. However, especially if you're in a large organization, I mean, I've just got a small lab environment here. I've only got a few computers. However, in a medium to large organization, you'll have hundreds or thousands of devices. I mean, this has no distinction under devices. This is every device that that System Center can find, Configuration Manager can find. So that's way too big of a scope. So what we need to do is to narrow this down. It's kind of like this. If I took all of my Star Trek and Star Wars action figures and just put them all in a single box, that would be wrong, people. Because, I mean, after all, Captain Kirk might be next to Princess Leia. That would be a collision of science fiction universes. It's just against nature. It shouldn't be done. And I'm sure you all agree. So how could we distinguish that? Well, I would put them in separate boxes. Similarly, with all of our devices, all of our users, I can figure out ways to separate them into more organizable resources. Isn't that a word? Organizable? I think you know what I'm saying. And to make all of this work, we work with collections. This is going to be a logical grouping of discovered resources. And there's a number of different examples of how we might use these or how they might be useful. This is a very short list. Basically, it's not really limited. I mean, you could come up with a variety of different criteria for reasons why you want to separate these resources or distinguish them, and how you want to work with them. And you can even combine different collections for virtually limitless purposes. But for example, I might want to separate my client PCs, like my workstations, desktop PCs, from servers. I don't want them both in the same container, so to speak. Because I might want to deploy Office 2000, what's the latest version of Office 2012 or something like that? I don't even know. But I might want to deploy the latest version of Microsoft Office to all of my workstations. I don't want to deploy that to my SQL server. It wouldn't make any sense. So I can distinguish this by separate collections and then deploying software only to those PCs. I can even make that further distinguished by saying only the client PCs that are discovered in a specific OU will receive this software. Maybe we're in a pilot program, or we just want to test out this software in one OU, not throughout our entire organization. So that's a couple of ideas there. Also, specific operating systems. If I want to upgrade from, say, Windows 7 to Windows 8.1 or Windows 10, presumably is what the next version is going to be called at the time of this recording, well, I don't want to try to upgrade different operating systems or to upgrade a server to Windows Server 2010, right? Because that, again, first of all, it's not even possible, but I don't want to get into conditions here where I'm going to start getting a lot of log errors that it was not possible to update that and, creating a lot of panic unnecessarily. So I want to identify specific operating systems and then do specific things with it. I also have software that I want to roll out. Maybe it's only compatible with Windows 8 or 8.1. It's not compatible with Windows 7. Therefore, again, I need to distinguish between my different operating systems, and collections can be a way to do that. And this really combines with another thing that we'll talk about in the future. Collections really goes into asset intelligence. Okay, and that's a big topic all on its own. But that's where we start to take together all of these collections and then start to put kind of decision-making factors into these collections. What we want to do is to, again, install software. We want to perform, rollouts. We want to see where software actually is installed. Maybe we have a piece of software where we kind of lost track of all the licensing and everything. So we can search for a specific unique DLL or executable or something like that and find out every computer that has that specific file. Once we've done that, we found out where the software is. There's also role-based administration. Configuration Manager is one of the biggest, most complicated pieces of software that Microsoft has. And in a lot of organizations, you don't have just one Configuration Manager that does everything. We generally will split the roles up so that I'll be responsible for software deployment. You'll be responsible for upgrading operating systems and imaging. Somebody else will be responsible for, I don't know, coming up with baselines. So a lot of different things that we can do there, but with the collections, we can also use that in conjunction with role-based administration, so only certain administrators have certain capabilities with a collection. There's also asset intelligence. Actually, I just talked about that earlier, didn't I? I forgot that I had that down here at the bottom. And then there's maintenance windows. You can use this in conjunction also with that. So again, if I have a big Microsoft Office deployment to make, I don't want to do that at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody's working, supposedly. That or they're on Facebook. Who knows? So I don't really want to do that then. I want to do that at 2 a.m. instead during off-peak hours. And the maintenance window can help to establish that. And also, keep in mind that you can create folders in the console that are going to be very useful for this, especially as you get into a more logically grouped and complex infrastructure. If you don't start to create folders to organize all of this, you won't be able to see the forest for the trees. So let's take a look at our users here as an example, just a starting point. I'll create a few different collections here. Let's say that here we go. Let's say we've got these Phoenix users. Now there's a few different ways of creating collections. I can do a query collection. I can do a direct collection. Direct criteria. I can do, I can exclude other collections. You can combine different collections to come up with a uniqueness. So, I could do that. I could say, hey, look, here's all of my Phoenix users. Phoenix users 01 through 09. And I think that's it. Yeah, they're alphabetized and also. That should be all of them, right? And then what I can do, let me also expand this so we can make sure we're not missing anything. There we go. Then what I can do is to add that selected item, or selected items, plural, to a new user collection. Oh, that's very handy. So then I'll just call this my Phoenix users. And this is going to be a direct rule. I'll show you that here coming up. Direct rule. And then the limiting collection here, it will be something like this, all users. Okay. Now, when you create a collection, which is just exactly what I'm showing you what to do here, you have to make it kind of a subset of something else that appears. When we work with computer accounts instead, right now you can see we're working with users, but if we were to work with computers instead, or devices, then it would give us different criteria here, such as all systems. But I'll click OK there for now for users, and then we click on Next. And notice what it's done here. It's created a direct rule. This is kind of a hard-coded, static rule for Phoenix users that I've named specifically in this. All right? You probably can see where I'm going with this. I'll give you a clue. What happens if I create this now, and then tomorrow morning, some other administrator creates Phoenix user 10? I'm kind of stuck with what I got, aren't I? No. Let's take a look at this. Okay, so we'll use incremental updates for this collection. Really won't much matter for this point, because I've statically created all of this, and the increment really won't do much of anything. But you can add rules, such as direct rules. I could add an additional direct rule and add Phoenix user 10 if I wanted to. But that would be a manual add. Or I could do query rule, which is going to be much better. And again, I can include or exclude other collections that I may have created, but I haven't done any of those yet. Notice that there was also a schedule button there, which explains itself. Now what I do is, if I go to my user collections, there we go. There's my user, Phoenix users direct, because I had a direct rule. And now I can right-click on this and choose Show Members. It takes me up here to Assets and Compliance, and then there's Users and Phoenix Users Direct. This is the results of that rule. This does present the problem, though. Okay. One thing I want to show you, a quick tangent here, is I've just gone in here and I've done Install Windows Feature RSAT, Remote Server Administration Tools, for Active Directory Directory Services. That's what that is. That gives me all of the Active Directory tools. So if I go to my Start Charm here, and I go Active Directory, you can see here I've got all the stuff. Users, computers, directory, domains and trusts, administrative center, all that stuff. All right. Now I've already pinned Active Directory users and computers to my taskbar, which is outside of your viewing area, but there it is. And now I want to create a user. So I'm just going to copy that user, and I'll create Phoenix user 10. And we'll quickly just create this user. And because I'm also a certified ethical hacker and a crack mind at security, I'm going to leave the password blank. And then I'll click on Finish here. Okay, so now we have this additional user, don't we? But if we go over here to Phoenix Users Direct, I could go to the Collection tab and update the membership. Ooh, I know someone told me they just added that member, so I'm going to click on Yes here. Still don't see him. Let me click off of that and then click back on it. That'll probably appear now. Or maybe not. Let me try that again. Update membership again. We keep clicking the same buttons over and over again. Nothing happens. Why? Because remember, when I created this user collection, for Phoenix Users Direct, if I could double click on that now, it'll take me up to there. But if I go back to that, gosh, I can't seem to click on the right thing. There it is. If I go back to that and go to its properties, we'll see that it was a static, kind of a direct membership rule. So if I click on membership rules, we see they're all here, just statically. Now I could change that by going to query rule, and that might be more useful. Now, you might have looked at that and said, okay, great. If direct rules are not very useful, why do you create them? You'd try not to. A query rule is so much better, and it's probably going to be useful for more than 90% of all the different kinds of collections you're gonna be creating. So, for example, maybe I've got an organizational unit here. Let's go to computers now. Okay, so this is going to relate to systems, and maybe it's the OU for my file servers. This is the most whittled down distinction we have, is we have our file servers OU here. Now within that file servers OU, I have 12 servers. There's 1 through 6, and there's 7 through 12. There's 1 through 6 file servers. There's 7 through 12 file servers. Maybe we've distinguished our job responsibilities so that I'm responsible for only 1 through 6. If that's the case, and there's nothing else unique about this OU or about the configuration of these file servers or something, I might have to come up with a direct rule so that I'm directly responsible for 1 through 6 and somebody else will do 7 through 10. Okay, so that's one way we could use that if there's no other way to make a distinction. Otherwise, however, you're better off to create a query. So I'm going to delete this one, actually delete this one here. Be very careful of this one. Because here it says delete each collection member from the database. Sure, why not? Because I want to delete all this, right? What that will do is it will also delete the users from, for example, all users. And then they'll have to be rediscovered at a later point in time. So I'm going to click OK here and to just point that out. Okay, so now we go in here. Now I don't have my Phoenix users anymore. That could really cause some problems here. So what I might want to do is to refresh that before I move on. So anyway, to resolve that, I'm going to go back down to Administration, Hierarchy Configuration, and rediscover those users from out of Active Directory. So I'll run full discovery now, give that a little bit of time, and then we'll go back up to Assets and Compliance. Hopefully, if I refresh this and everything, we should be able to see our users come back here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm also going to go back to User Collections and also to update the membership. There we go. And then now I should be able to see all of these users again. And it says I've got 60 items. I think that's correct here. So there we go. So there's my Phoenix users again. You can see how disruptive that could be, though. Yeah, you got to really watch that check mark. That could be the check mark of death. So going back down here to user collections, I'm going to do a better way to create one of these collections. I'm going to create a user collection, and I'm going to call this my Phoenix users query this time. And we're going to limit the collection to all users. Okay? And then as we click on Next, we can add our rule. Now this time it's going to be a query rule. And I'm going to call this, again, this is somewhat arbitrary, Phoenix users query, something like that. And then if I can import a query statement. So for example, maybe my Tucson administrator has the exact same kind of query, only it says Tucson users in it. Well, I could just borrow their existing query without having to create one from scratch and then just replace the word Tucson with Phoenix. And I'm done. Okay, it's very, very simple. So you can kind of trade these around. If you also Google for certain very specific and granular statements, you can get pretty much a criteria for almost anything you want. It's abundant out there. Then I'm looking for the user resource. And I'm going to edit the query statement here so that the criteria is going to be that I want a simple value where the attribute class for the user resource is going to be a user OU name. How about that? Okay. I can also choose the user name if I wanted to, or the user principal name. Those are both ways of also getting there. But if I've done my organizational unit structure smartly, then I probably will only have user accounts in there. And if I've named it properly, which if we go back to it, remember, it's named Phoenix users, and I have a separate one for Phoenix admins. So this should be a good scope to work with here. Okay, but again, depends on what you've got. You could choose principal names if you want. That would also be good. Then it's going to be equal to, but notice we have a lot of other operators here. Okay, a lot of different other operators. But I want to make it equal to, which is going to actually put an equal sign in the structure. But we could also do for other things is like. So maybe I want it to start with Phoenix user and then asterisk, or actually it would be a %. And then I can specify my value here, which in this case is going to be my Phoenix users organizational unit, because I know I've designed it properly and it's only got those users in it. So then I click on OK, and that's pretty much it. If you want to show the query language, you can do that. By the way, this is something that you should be aware of. Let me zoom in on this. I'm not going to say you have to be able to know how to type this out from scratch. We used kind of the buttons and drop-down list to build this for us, right? However, you should be able to look at one of these, especially if you feel like you might need to answer certain questions in the future, people. And you should be able to look at this and at least identify if that's going to work. So, for example, if I were to look at this and the objective for me was to find all the users in the Phoenix users organizational unit, but right about here I saw a bang, or a question mark, then that's equivalent in the structured language there to no. So that would say I don't want to find Phoenix users. Okay. Or if you saw the word not somewhere in there, that would again be a red flag saying that's not going to work. Okay. So you do kind of have to know not how to create these from scratch, but you have to be able to understand what you're looking at there. All right. And the better you are with SQL, the better you'll be with this, because the thinking is the same, the language is the same or similar in a lot of places, not just here, but in other places as well. You can also use incremental updates for this collection and schedule it as necessary. Then I click on Next, Next, and Close. Now, when I go to the Phoenix Users Query, I can double-click on that, and it'll take me up here. I might need to refresh this, update the membership, okay, and so forth. Hopefully it'll come up here pretty soon. Maybe it's going to make a fool out of me. Let me click off of that and click out. There it is. I click off of it and click back on. Sometimes you just have to go away from it and come back, but there they are now. Okay. Notice that it also picked up Phoenix User 10, Phoenix User 10. And to further make that point, I'm going to very quickly create copy another user. I'll call this one Phoenix User 11. And we're going to see this one pop in automatically, which would happen during the Delta. But we will just go ahead and trigger this manually as well here right now. Okay, and then we go back over here. And if I want to update the membership, then we let that take a little bit of time, and we come back to it here. And we should see this come back to life. Still don't see client user 10, but we'll just go back here and again, run this. And sometimes you got to give it a kick in the pants. Now, most administrators for Configuration Manager will be just fine with the time that it already takes. It's just that I'm kind of in a hurry because I'm trying to show you this in kind of a lab environment. All right, finally, after clicking around, it populated here, and there's my Phoenix User 11. Okay, I actually had to go to Taco Bell to get a chalupa, and then come back, and finally this thing was populated, all right? So anyway, any excuse to eat a chalupa. Now, using similar methods, I could go to my devices, and we can see here I've got a Windows 8.1.01 and a Windows 8.1.02. These are obviously Windows 8.1 computers by the computer name. Problem is, what happens when we roll out Windows 10 to these computers? Well, now it's confusing because the name says 8.1, but they're actually Windows 10 and so on. So there's better ways to make this distinction. And maybe I wasn't very bright for naming them those, but anyway, we see that happen in many organizations. So what I want to do instead is to go to Device Collections and to create a device collection here based on a query. So we'll call this our Windows 8.1 workstations. And then we'll make a limiting collection again of all systems, and then next and next. And then we'll add a rule. Of course, we're going to make a query rule this time. And then what we could do is to, again, import a query statement if someone else has come up with something pretty good in the past. But I'm just going to go Windows 8.1 query. And then we can use a system resource here. Now, by the way, if we take a look at this, we have system resource and unknown computer. And then we can edit the query statement. If we take a look at that, then we go to the criteria. This is saying what I'm looking for. And if we take a look at the criteria type, it's a simple value here, but we're selecting from an attribute class of system resource. Now look at all the stuff we have here. We can look at app V applications that are being used. We can do all kinds of things. We want to see where BitLocker is being used. I mean, there is a whole bunch of stuff right here. And this just requires some experience to go through some of these, although most of them pretty well explain themselves. But what I'm trying to get to here is, suppose I could have done this a faster way. System resource, there it is. And the system resource is going to have the operating system name and version, which is down here. There it is, operating system name and version, and OK. And then the value needs to be, and then it conveniently gives me Microsoft Windows NT Server 6.3, which is Server 2012 R2. and then NT Workstation 6.3, which is Windows 8.1. So that's what this is going to give me, and I can click OK here. All right. Now, once I've got that down, then I can click OK. And by the way, this becomes an easy string to work with later on. If I click OK here again and I show the query language, if I have a different version, I don't know, 6.1 or something like that, I can just copy all of this and paste it into a different query, and that would be quite easy to work with. And I actually accidentally removed my value, so I just put them back there. And again, there's our query language. Okay, so there it is. And then I click on OK. And then I can, again, increment this if I want to. Again, that'll help me because right now it'll show 2 clients, but later on when they're upgraded to Windows 10, they'll go off the list because they're not Windows 8.1 anymore. So we click on Next and Next, and then we click on Close. Now we're going to go ahead and look for these machines. So we're going to go ahead and update the membership, and then I'm going to show the members, and there they are. Bam. Now, I'm going to tell you, this whole thing, these collections are so useful, it's kind of hard to stop here. And they're so critical in building your asset intelligence that let me just show you another one. So, for example, if I go to my device collections, I've got all desktop and server clients. That's not very useful either, right? Because very rarely do we manage both of those things the same way. So what I might want to do here instead is to create a device collection that shows me only servers. So I'm going to say Windows servers. And then we click on Eliminating Collection. We'll just still use all systems, I guess, but we'll click OK here. And then we're going to go ahead and go to Next, and then we'll enter in a new query where we're going to call this, again, server query. And really, this would be specifically probably a Microsoft items. And then we're going to look for the system resource, and the query statement is going to read under the criteria. Again, we click a little sunshine here, which is nice in Phoenix here today because it's an unusually cloudy day, but we'll click on attribute class here of system resource. And by typing in the letters, that gets me down there faster than I did last time. And then the attribute here, again, will be operating system name and version. But this time, it's going to be different. Because my operator, I don't want it to be equal to. I want it to be is like. And then I'm going to enter in percent server percent. So when it reports the operating system value, so if I clicked on value, remember here it says server in there. Anything that says server in it now, if I use is like and percent server percent, okay, like you see right there, then it's just going to return anything with server in its reported operating system. Okay, so again, I can use incremental updates for that one, and I could do the same thing for workstation. That would help me again to distinguish workstation computers from server computers. Then back here in the device collections, I can go to Windows servers and I can say show me the members, and bam, there's 3 servers that are installed with the name server in them. These are all, I happen to know these are all Server 2012 R2 servers. And then real quickly, I did forget, I mentioned folders earlier. You can organize your collections in folders by right-clicking here to choose folder and then create folder. And I'll just say, my user collections or something like that. Okay, now I've got a my users collections down here. If I go back up to this collection, you can't drag and drop these. Notice that nothing happens there. But if you do, I'll right-click on it or click the button up here and choose move. Then you can specify where you want it to go. And there it is. Now it'll appear in my user collections. Do a similar thing for device collections to keep your sanity, especially as various collections grow. All right, that wraps it up. We finally got our user and device collections created. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.